I am calling our budget workshop for the fiscal year 2018-2019 to order. Roll call, please, Pat.
Hood.
Here.
Balmus.
Present.
Garner.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Dorsenson.
Here.
Jacobs. And Trustee Jacobs did let us know he's running about 10-15 minutes late, so we expect to see him shortly.
All right. I know you guys had an opportunity to meet with staff in advance of this, but it says a public workshop, so we do want to make sure we go over it completely and make whatever adjustments. I don't have to remind you after this many years, this is the most important thing we do all year to make sure that we can operate 24/7, 365 days a year. So Pat, take it away.
Yeah, so I'll get you started here. Just kind of what we're going to run through, go over the financial planning and reporting process quick, and then we'll run through the presentation files of budget documents. So we'll kind of hit high level at the transmittal and executive overview, and then get into a little more detail of the budget summary, and then have a recap on capital, which you've heard a couple times up to this point. So just a reminder where we're at in the process, kind of midway as it relates to the yearly financial reporting. We went over the multi-year financial forecast a couple months ago. At the end of December, Scott and Brian presented the capital plan. Going over the budget tonight, and then once the budget's approved, Brian has his quarterly status reports, and then we end up with the audit that we review in October. Just a reminder on the timeline. So this is really a 4-month, 5-month process for staff. So like I said, we hit the first two here earlier. Beginning in into March, the budget workshops. One scheduled for tonight. If we need another one after tonight, that would be before the next regular board meeting. The plan currently, which is subject to change based on how things go tonight, is to bring the budget before you for consideration the first meeting in April, and then obviously the fiscal year starts on May 1.
From an accounting standpoint, there's just one change I wanted to point out. As you know, the Village Consolidated Dispatch informed the Northeast Lake County Consolidated ETSB. I got a nod from Chris, so I think I'm good there. This fund will be reported as a component unit of the village. What that means is essentially we have no authority over the budget of the actual ETSB or joint ETSB, but it is reported in our CAFR, so the audit at the end of the year, and it is part of our audit. So when Lauterbach and Amen comes out and audits the village, they'll also audit the JETSB, we call it, or the ETSB. So. And then just a reminder, we did maintain our 911 fund, Fund 121, as a pass-through. How that works is we make purchases out of there and then seek reimbursement from the JETSB, so it's a net zero at the end of the year.
As we put the budget together, I mean, it's guided by obviously our mission and our key performance areas that came out of the strategic planning process. Just as a reminder, we're on our second iteration of the strategic plan that we go through and update. So we report out twice a year. So as we updated it for the budget process, the version in here, section 3 of the budget book, that's been updated. So we're not going to go over it in detail tonight, but you can take a look through there and see the progress that's been made. And then we'll be back again around the July timeframe with a second update. So to keep that in front of you and in front of the department heads to make sure they're working towards those goals set in there. So some of the budget factors as we got rolling, putting the budget together, obviously, sales tax is our main bread and butter, and we are seeing some declines in there. I mean, we've talked about the impact that online shopping has had, and no legislation to capture sales tax on those payments across the board. We've got that administrative fee that the state of Illinois has imposed on collecting and remitting our home rule sales tax, so that's about a $200,000 hit to the village right off the top. And then obviously, as demographics in the community change, so do shopping habits. So whether it's the community aging and them changing on that end, or you having younger families moving in and how they go about making their purchases. So I mean, those are three big factors that impact sales tax, which is obviously, as I said before, kind of the lifeblood of the village budget. You're aware of the amusement and hotel tax increases that staff is proposing. That's on the regular agenda for consideration later this evening. Based on the discussion we had a month ago, we did factor those increases into the budget. So amusement tax going from 3 to 4 and hotel tax going from 5 to 6. So those are built in. Again, a negative, the income tax reduction. So that 10% reduction, it was originally proposed as a 1-year item at the state level. It's been brought up, and they're proposing it for another year now, so we built that into the budget, so that's a $300,000 hit. You'll see when Brian has an income tax revenue chart here later on in the presentation, we did have a little bump this year, but that's because they accelerated 2 payments. So instead of receiving 12 payments this fiscal year, we'll get 14, and then next year they'll implement that 10% reduction, which will be a $300,000 hit. So between just the two things the state of Illinois did, that was a $500,000 hit before we even got going with the budget this year, which obviously doesn't help. Full-time equivalents are flat. In the budget book, we had it up a half a position, but as we talked about in the one-on-one meetings, there was a part-time position in the administration budget that we envisioned bouncing between the front of the building and the back of the building. With some recent changes in personnel that we've had, we don't think that position's needed, so we pulled that out of the budget. So with our employees being our most valuable but also most expensive item in the budget, being able to keep headcount flat is a good thing from a budgetary perspective. A general fund balance, as you know, the requirement is 35%. We're still above 60, so that's good in light of everything that's happening. We did have some bonds expire this current fiscal year. That was the police department debt payment. So we took care of that in December. So the police department's paid off, so that was good. So that was $800,000. We don't have to worry about making those payments on anymore. We do have our economic development agreements that are in place or shaping up. So we have the Great Wolf, which was the key lime that we tweaked a little bit. So just a reminder, the net on that to the village is $550,000 is what we end up with at the end of the day. The rest is rebated back to them through that agreement. We've got the Gurnee Mills, so that's the $1 million as our share of the $6 million total project for renovations out there. They've got started on those. We haven't had any request for reimbursement yet, but David reached out to Randy at the mills last week, and he was expecting to have something before the end of the fiscal year. So we had the year-end estimate at $250. I'm not sure if it'll be that whole $250, so we might be changing that year-end estimate, pulling that down a little bit. The Alpha Media, so that's the 4 radio stations we talked about a couple of meetings ago. That's been included in the budget. And then with the amusement tax and hotel tax increase, we had thrown out setting aside some money for economic development opportunities that may come up in the future. So that $300,000 that we talked about setting aside, that is included in the budget and earmarked in here in the contingency fund. So it's not included in the ordinances itself. We had talked about that, and it seemed like the feeling from the village board was they didn't want to pigeonhole that so tightly, so we did not include it in the ordinances, but we will, as we move forward and obviously get the village board's blessing, try to set some money aside for that and allow that to accrue. So the $300,000 was what we threw out for this first year, and that's what's built into the budget. And then the pension fundings for the police and fire, actually, the contributions this year, or the increase, is actually smaller than we've seen in the past. I mean, we've seen some years, I was looking back, 15, 16 was $173,000 increase on the police side and $231 on the fire side. The next years, both of them were over $200,000. So this year we've got a $69,000 increase, or 3.3% on the police side, and $72,000, which is 4.2% on the fire side. So those have been trending down as far as those increases. And as Brian's talked about, there's multiple factors that go into that, including the makeup of the pension fund and investment returns and other actuarial assumptions. But we are funding 100% of what the actuary recommends that we fund. So, and capital improvement fund, as you saw in here, each year we keep saying that it's the village's largest capital program in history, and then the next year we end up doing more. So again, this year will be the largest capital program in the village's history. A lot of that has to do with the Nose Road Water Tower. But as you know, since we've got that 0.5% home rule sales tax approved 3-4 years ago and earmarked that for capital spending, we've turned Scott and his crew loose as far as playing catch up on the roads, water, and some equipment purchases. So with Key Lime, Great Wolf coming out of the picture this current fiscal year, we like to try to do $675, a transfer from the general fund to the capital improvement fund. We weren't able to do that. So that pulled down the capital fund balance a little bit. What we did this coming next fiscal year, so when we were working on the general fund, we had a little bit of a surplus, so we took $200,000 of that general fund surplus, are proposing to transfer that to the capital fund, and then in the impact fee fund side, what we've been doing historically is about $200,000 a year, transfer out of there to the capital fund. We bumped that up from $200,000 to $400,000, and a lot of that has to do with the work down in Providence Village, stormwater work that we're going to need to do, So that made sense from that point. The impact fee fund still has a fund balance of about $1.2 million, so that's still in pretty good shape. I'd like to keep the capital fund around $1 million. With these changes here, it was a little over $700,000, I think, is where it ended up. So it's a little short of where we feel comfortable, but still not in a bad spot. It's, depending on how the general fund performs, we have a $87,000 surplus built in right now, typically beat that. So that can either be added to the general fund surplus balance, or we could do a transfer at the end of the fiscal year like we've done in the past. We just have to see where we end up. At some point, though, depending on how the general fund performs, we're going to have to scale back on capital a little bit. We've been going great guns a-blazing and have made great progress, but that can only last so long. So sewer fund, like I said, Knowles Rural Water Tower, that's the big nut in there. The IEPA loan is on the regular village board agenda tonight for consideration, so we'll go over that again at the regular meeting. And then also new this year, $350,000 for meter change out. This is going to be a 5-year program, update the meters and the reading software where you're able to pull the data real time, don't have to do the drive-bys, sends it all wirelessly. So that's something that we're in the beginning stages preparing for that. So the results of all staff's hard work, kind of the highlights of the budget here. So 18th year with no property tax or utility tax. So that's pretty unheard of in the municipal realm. So we're proud of that. Obviously the increase in amusement tax and hotel tax, as we talked about, those are taxes that haven't been adjusted in 20 or 30 years. And with the desire to keep the tax burden on the residents as light as possible, these are paid heavily by visitors to the community. So that was kind of the direction we looked. Obviously, nobody likes a tax increase. We don't like to have to do that. But when sales tax, is continuing to be flat or declining a little bit, that was where we looked towards. The economic development agreements, like I talked about, continuing with our really aggressive capital plan, holding true to what's in the strategic plan, keeping head count flat, and then keeping that general fund reserve balance up over the 60%. I think it's just something that the village board and everyone can be proud of.
All right, so getting into the numbers a little bit here, and I'll try to stay high level in this section and not repeat things that either the department heads might say or that we'll talk about later on in the presentation. So looking at revenues across all funds in total, up 6.6 million or 9.4%. Looking at governmental funds here, they're up 2.9 million or about 6.2%. Biggest changes are the general fund, up 3.5 million or 9%. The capital fund up about 233,000, 4.5%, and the bond fund is down 858,000 or 41.7%. And this is the impact of that debt expiring that Pat mentioned earlier. Water and sewer up 2.4 million or 19.6%. A lot of this is the IEPA loan offset by some other things, lower capital transfers. And then police and fire pensions up 1.2 million or 12%, and this is primarily investment income. If you remember last year, we budgeted for the actuary assumption of 7% returns in those two funds, but last year they actually exceeded it. Well, hopefully that'll happen again this year, but we stuck with that same methodology and budgeted 7% return for both of those. And again, we'll get in more in depth with all this stuff in a little bit here as we go through the presentation. Looking at revenues, again, across all funds by categories, just pointing out some changes from last year. Taxes is the largest category, 44% of all revenues. That's up 2.9 million or 9.4%. Again, here it's primarily in the general fund, the Great Wolf coming back online, and the adjustment to the hotel and amusement taxes. Charges for service, second largest at 20% of all revenues. That's up 691,000 or 4.7%. This is primarily contractual arrangements for 911. We have a full year of Zion. We only had 10 months of that arrangement last year. And then water and sewer fees. Investments and contributions, again, up 15.3%. This is the pension side, and obviously just general interest rate increases across the board, but primarily the pension side here. And then other sources makes up 10%. This is up 1.6 million or 27.3%. This is due to the IEPA loan primarily. And again, these are just big movers from last year. We'll get more in depth into what is behind those numbers as we move through the presentation. On the expenditure side, expenditures across all funds are up $4 million, or 6.1%. Looking at governmental funds, up $905,000, or 1.8%. Big ones here: general fund up $2.5 million, 6.4. MFT, you see that going down $850,000. That's because we zeroed that expenditure line out. We'll spend those funds every other year to be more efficient in how we file the paperwork there, and use consulting dollars and in-house staff to accomplish those tasks. Impact fee fund, as Pat mentioned, this is up $150,000 or 60% with the increased transfer. And then we see that on the expenditure side, bond fund here, $858,000 again, down 41.7%. Water and sewer up $2.5 million, 19.5%. And then fiduciary fund expenditure side, $633,000, 17.3%. And this is almost exclusively due to just additional pensioners hitting the funds. Expenditures by category across all funds: salary and benefits is the largest category, or salary and wages, excuse me, at 37% of all expenditures, up $867,000 or 3.4%. Contractual services makes about 13% of all expenditures. That's down $1 million or 10% here, but that's where we see the impact of the lower MFT program. Capital is also 13% of overall expenditures. Is up $2.5 million or 38.6%. There's the Knowles Road Tower impact. And then other financing uses makes up 10% of all expenditures, and is up $1.4 million or almost 25%. And here we see the Great Wolf incentive impact, the Reserve for Economic Development, and then here's where we account for transfers between funds as well. So all those revenues and expenditures, how do those variances shake out in the end? Looking at governmental funds here, we'll start at the general fund. Projected surplus of $87,000. As Pat mentioned, that was $287,000 earlier in the process, and we transferred $200,000 from the general fund to the capital fund, so that brought that down to $87,000. MFT fund has a projected surplus of $885,000. Again, reasons noted, putting that off another year. Impact fee fund deficit of $365,000. Again, just for the transfer there, to the capital funds. Capital improvement fund is being drawn down by $646,000. Maintain our plan, as Pat mentioned, this will be a source of discussion later on this year when we get to the capital plan. How to keep that fund around $1 million. Where do we need to adjust, and where the general fund will come in at the end of this year. Total governmental funds here. Projected deficit is just $35,000, so good shape overall, non-water, sewer, and pension funds. Water and sewer is drawn down by $400,000. In the multi-year forecast in the capital plan, we were actually projected to draw that down by $450,000 annually. If you remember, JAWA's rate drops off in a couple years, and we were going to draw down the fund balance in there to keep up with the capital plan for a couple years until that happened. So we're actually ahead of the game. It also includes the first payment for the IEPA loan, so we're actually another $500,000 ahead of the game from where we thought we would be with the forecast here. And then police and fire pensions, again, budgeted at large surplus as investment returns are budgeted at 7%. Excuse me, and both funds are still growing. More people putting in than taking out. So we'll see those funds grow over time here. Where does that leave us for fund balance at the end of next year projections? General fund balance down slightly from May 1 of 2017. We originally said we would hope to keep that flat, but please remember that we did have a budget of $200,000 transfer this year, so if you add that back in, it's essentially flat. MFT builds up to $1 million. That'll be included in next year's capital program. Capital, as Pat mentioned earlier, is at $716,000 at the end of this year. Again, I'd like to see that around $1 million, so depending on how we finish the year, we might make some adjustments there. And water and sewers at $4.8 million. Even with the planned drawdown of $400,000, you're still at around 50% of expenditures there, so very healthy fund balance in the water and sewer fund.
Yeah, and I would just point out, so the top row there, general fund, where you see the projected surplus or deficit of minus $367. I mean, that originally was minus $870,000, I believe, is what we had in the budget when we took out Key Lime Cove. So we were able to make up $500,000, reduce that deficit $500,000 in light of the flood this summer, which added some extra expense. So deficit is never good, but that's much smaller than what we had originally projected going in. So.
Looking specifically at the general fund, moving into section 6 of the budget document here. Revenues by category. General fund is heavily reliant on taxes, obviously, account for 68.5% of all revenues in the general fund. Taxes are increasing by 11.7%. This is obviously with Great Wolf coming back online and the adjustments to amusement and hotel tax. We'll look at all major revenues in more detail here in a minute. Licenses and permits down 106,000. Again, these are one-time revenues related to development, mostly in the building permits here. Intergovernmental revenues down 87,000. We talked about the impact of the income tax reduction, 10% there. That was offset by a small increase in personal property replacement tax. Charges for service up 355,000 or 5.8%. Here's the dispatch and fire contracts. Also a small increase in ambulance fees here. Fines and forfeitures up 165,000 or 8.1% in the general fund. This is increased red light collections due to a couple intersections coming online, and also increased collections from iDrop. We've had some great success with that program through the state, and we've seen those tick up year after year and continue to participate in that program. Investments and contributions here up 128,000. Again, we're seeing interest rates obviously increase at pretty good clip, and we made some adjustments on the banking side because the interest rate we can earn in money market funds now exceeds what we would earn for a credit against fees. So we're earning that interest on that side. It'll be partially offset by some increased fees on the expenditure side, but it's well worth making that move. And then other sources here, this is flat. It's essentially, this is where we put receipts from damage to village property, so we'll just keep moving on from that one. Looking at major revenues here, sales tax 16.95 million. This is the lowest we budgeted since I want to say 15. I want to say. You can see the trend obviously is moving down, and as we talked about consumer habits, the state taking part of the home rule sales tax 2% there, and then the demographic shift in the community having some sort of impact there.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for the December sales tax numbers, so that should be later this week, maybe early next week when that comes out. November was flat. The months before that were down, so I guess it's trending in the right direction coming up to the holidays. So
Trending up.
We'll see what December looks like.
Amusement tax here, you can see 3.21 million budgeted for this year. You can see I tried to highlight the portion there that was due to the increase, but essentially it moves slightly year to year depending on what attractions and weather and things like that, but it's slow increases. Looking at hotel resort tax, 3.78 million. You can see the small increase based on just this year's budget, what that would do, and then obviously adding Great Wolf, and then the increase that compounds, bringing them back online, is the big jump here. Food and beverage taxes are our most recession-proof. I love saying that. Our most recession-proof revenue source here just keeps ticking up. You can see in fiscal year 17 where Portillo's was added, there's you get a little bigger jump there than historical there, but very good revenue source that is steady and fairly recession-proof. And then income tax here, you see the spike in 17-18. That's from those two extra payments, and then the reduction in 18-19. 2.9 million total. On the expenditure side of the general fund, salaries and wages are up only 217,000 or 1%. Employee benefits up 313,000 or 2.9%. Professional and technical services up 92,000, 6.8%. Here we see the expenditure side of the red light cameras going up, and then some contract at the front counter. One of the employees at the front counter that we use is on contract, like to stay there, so we included that in contractual services this year. Contractual is up 164,000 or 10.3%. Here we see body cams, which I'm sure the chief will talk about a little bit here in a little bit. That maintenance agreement. Supplies Sorry, not keeping up here. Supplies down 121,000 or 8.1%. This is due to the original body cam expenditure came out of supplies, and then we moved that to contractual as we move forward. And then other financing uses is up 1.9 million or 69.3%. And I got just a little further detail on the salaries and wages. Cost of living increases and staffing changes make up for that almost that entire 217,000. On the employee benefits side, medical insurance, we had reconfigured how we were allocating that with the new software, so that added 122,000 to the general fund. There was a small increase in the overall cost, but most of that is just taken from water and sewer fund, reallocated to the general fund. Pension increases 147,000. Social Security, Medicare increases 33,000. Under other financing uses, here's kind of where we have our incentive agreements and transfers. Great Wolf incentive 2.17 million, reserved for economic development, as Pat mentioned earlier, 300,000. Transfer to capital, as we talked about, 200,000. Participation with the Mills Alpha Media is up 31,000. All that's offset by a reduction of 858,000 in debt service with that rolling off. And then just to note, this is also where we pay for the Park District bonds that expire in December of 2020. It's about 390,000. Personnel movements in the general fund. Administration eliminated the vacant finance assistant 2 position and added a staff accountant position. This was really a result of the software and the need, that reduced need for more of a data entry and a increased need for more of an analysis position or analyst position. Eliminated the vacant part-time general office secretary. This is what Pat talked about, that we'll make that change for the final budget. That ended up in contractual or professional and technical services. On the police side, eliminate vacant deputy chief position, added the director of support services, so civilianize that, and then added a police officer to keep sworn personnel at the same count they were. And the fire department eliminated the vacant deputy chief position, eliminated the vacant part-time administrative secretary position, and added a management analyst position for a net of 0 increases on FTEs. So we maintain our 223.62 FTEs. General fund balance here, this just shows the total general fund balance over time. You can see how it's steadily increasing. We had in between fiscal year 13-14 a large transfer from the general fund to the capital fund, but that's been building up over time. Over the last couple of years, you see it levels off a little bit. Obviously, with Great Wolf or Key Lime Cove coming offline there, had an impact on the fund balance, but overall, over time, steadily increasing. And with that, we can get into department sections. I'll start off with the administration, and then we'll kind of go to the table over there. Looking specifically at administration within the general fund, up only 33,000 or 2% versus last year. Most of the increase you see in professional services and decreases in salary and benefits is the movement of that part-time staff to contractual. Also under contractual is the addition of the new finance software. So that's in addition to COLAs and regular salary increases. That's the impacts here. Going to results from fiscal year 17-18 financial software, as I mentioned, we're entering the last phase of that with utility billing. I should say the second to last phase. We have business licensing coming next year. We're going to look at, but utility billing should be going online here May 1st. Looks like we're still on track for that. We'll do more of a presentation on that and features that are going to come with that for the public when we get to that point. Obviously, middle of the summer flood, had to deal with that. East Grand Phase 1 with the landscaping that happened out there. Renegotiated the incentive agreement with Key Lime Cove, transferred that to Great Wolf. Negotiated incentive agreement with Alpha Media, bring them to the mills. Jack worked on a pedestrian mobility plan. Had multiple business events that Ellen worked on. And Beer Fest, of course, had a successful year at Beer Fest again. Looking at next year, further economic development participation. Not sure what's going to come, but I'm sure that we will be involved at some stretch in maintaining or enhancing commercial corridors here. Phase 2 of East Grand, The Gurnee Process Improvement Committee, taking a look at our permitting processes and then also throwing business licensing in there in conjunction with the new software. And then continuing business events and another beer fest. With that, I'll turn it over to Director Velkover.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking at the figures for the Information Systems Division for next year, the biggest area of change is in the professional and technical services. With dispatch consolidation last year, we really put a significant amount of money into consulting, and with the hopes of using that as a shock absorber for the work that had to happen with consolidation. Given the pace of consolidation and whatnot, we didn't utilize all those funds. We changed the numbers for this new year to be much more realistic in terms of what we can actually take on, what funds we can exactly use, how we can use consulting and contractual to offset full-time staff. Other than that, we're overall down slightly. Most of it's all attributable to that one category change. Some of the things that transpired during 2017-18, specifically with regards to our connections with other agencies, both in the case of Zion Police and Fire and Beach Park Fire Department. That consolidation effort involved a lot of new connections, software support, working with their mobile units, things like that. We also made a change in our broadband service provider to use a Metro Ethernet style connection to bring that in, which is a really positive step forward for us. The timing on it was a little bit rough, but we worked through that. Brian already talked about the Munis implementation. We're glad to see that entering the final phases here. I think if we look back to when we started that process, it was difficult to overestimate how much involvement that would be from all the departments across the board. But I know me personally in preparing the budget for this year, you could really see the benefits of that. The process, the information that was available, all those things were at a level that I've not seen in my career here. Very positive. On facilities and equipment, we basically tore out the communication center and put it back. We did it one half at a time, so it wasn't completely down. But there were a lot of people that helped out with that, and it's a great one to have behind us. We're finishing up some of the changes in the emergency power setup for the police station. I like to tell people this is the one that always keeps me up at night. It'd be nice to have that done. We're really getting to a modern setup on that, so that loss of electrical power is something we don't, we have an extremely slim chance of ever seeing, which is certainly a big positive on the public safety side. Through the course of all the things that were going on, we changed out switches, desktops, laptops, copiers, APs, phone sets. All the things we normally do kind of were on the back burner, but they got done anyway. A lot of people pitched in on that. We're entering the end of our IP surveillance, video surveillance system. I find personally that's something I use all the time to remember what time I went home when I'm trying to figure out my timesheet or something like that. And we also did a lot of work at fire stations on structured cabling. We've got a lot of things now for our various buildings where we're on our second or our third iteration of those. And with our familiarity from when they went in, the people we have on staff, we're able to do those at a fill-in project in between other things, keep people busy, keep our familiarity up with it, works really well. 2018-2019, as part of tonight's agenda, we have a fiber project with the help of engineering and Scott and his team was successfully bid and is ready for consideration. Has a significant component working with Warren Township High School. Some follow-up things to consolidation. We have a microwave link we want to finish while we have the grant money available. We want to share our leads connection with Zion Police to look for some cost sharing and improvement in that area. Looking forward on the data records management side, patient medical reporting is high on our agenda for this year. Chief Kavanaugh has really got a great program lined up with that, and it's an area of automation that's probably the biggest gap we have right now. We're also looking at managed file transfer to give employees ways to move files in and out of our network in a secure and safe manner. Jack's going to talk about CRM and request management. And then from a facilities and equipment standpoint, there's dollars in for storage area networking in the capital plan. There's some open-ended discussion about changes at the Mills substation for the police department. And then the utility department is really looking to take a pilot project for lift stations on sanitary and a greatly increased monitoring point of view and spread that across other lift stations. But those are some of the things that major points. Be happy to answer any questions, or otherwise I'll be glad to hand it over to Jack.
All right. So for public info, I guess the biggest thing on this slide, the major decreases just comes from the website wrapping up and kind of how we change the funding for that. So for some of the things, right at the beginning of the fiscal year, we launched our new mobile-friendly website. So the new website, one of the nice things about it is it has a very good analytics section. So since May 15th, we've had 137,000 visits to our website, 703 people shared our social media stuff through the website, and then 278 new social media followers just from the website alone. So on average, we had about 600 visitors each day, and we had 2 days that stood out as record days, July 12th and October 28th. July 12th being with the flood. We had a lot of people come, and then October 28th, everyone was looking up when trick-or-treat was. So those are kind of, our website has two big spikes. So, and then the interesting thing too is 40% of the traffic is coming from mobile phones. So that's actually it hasn't increased as much as I had thought with the new website, but that's something that we'll track over time and see if that increases. So as far as social media, one of our things that's grown by far the most in the last couple of years has been our Facebook presence. So we've had 140% growth this last year. So we started out at 1,900 likes in May, and we're at 3.7 thousand likes this year, or 3,700. And to put that into perspective, I mean, it depends on what you're looking at. Looking at some of our benchmark communities, we kind of follow them, see what they're doing. I mean, we're right in the middle of the pack, but our page is younger and we're outpacing them. So we should be, we're doing pretty well, I think, in that regard. Recently, we migrated our municipal code to an online format, easier to search, easier to track changes over time, and it's also saving us money. Another thing that we did too is as has been mentioned, and I'm sure will be mentioned in every department in some regard, is the flood in 2017 was a big thing we had. But overall, we thought that it was a good example of seeing how we can outreach for communication in an emergency. And I think it was also a good example, and I saw, in how different departments communicated between each other, and not only that, but also our interagency. We were talking with the Park District, they were sharing our stuff, Warren Township, we were sharing information, so it's just a really good example of the networks we have here in Gurnee. Another one too, so our website comments, so we can kind of track kind of how that's going. The nice thing is we moved it to more of a managed process, so kind of away from more of a automated where residents picked where things went. We kind of now, I take it and I manually send it out. So it's increased our response rate. The pros is things now get to the right department where they should, but the cons are this is growing more and more. We had 655 comments in the last year, and it's something that we think will increase over time. So that kind of leads into one of the projects we want to work on for 2018, 2019, and this is the implementation of our citizen relationship management software. So this is something that we had originally budgeted for this year. Unfortunately, it was, as we know, last year was about as busy of a year as we can have, so it's been pushed back for one more year. So we're still working on some sort of solution for this, and we think what it'll do is it'll really help us kind of routing things correctly, and also just making sure responses from everything from a pothole to trash problems, it gets out there, residents can log in, see where their response is at, and then we can see too and say, hey, there's one open that's been a couple days, where's it going? So it'll really help us, I think, in our online customer service. Another thing too that we're working on is, I got this inspired actually from a conference, was the idea of a communications team. So a lot of us, we informally communicate, myself, Tom Magos, Carrie Suarez, but what I really want to do is get us all together to kind of talk and get an idea of how we can think long term. And start thinking about one of the things I want to do is a strategic plan for how we can approach communication in the next couple of years, kind of get some ideas behind that, and then also do a branding guide. So with the branding guide, looking at kind of how we use the village logo, how we use different communication stuff, and make sure we kind of have a standard guide for how it's used. I think that'll be important in the future. And then, the final thing too I have is our contingency plan for professional public relations firm. So I did put a little money in our budget this year for this. And what this is essentially, I got this idea as well from looking at other communities. Communities like Ferguson and also recently Fox Lake, when they run into an emergency situation, what they then do is they get overwhelmed. Their staff cannot handle it. So what I think is ahead of time is I want to look at is contacting and finding firms that we can work with to set up relationships, vet them, and have them on retainer if we need them. So we wouldn't actually pay for it until we needed it, but just to have that ahead of time. Questions?
All right, looking at the contractual obligations here, we talked about this a little bit. Big increase here, 1.8 million. This is where we account for the recapture agreements, the reserve for, or the incentive agreements, the reserve for economic development and transfers in between funds. So total budget of 4.8 million. That's up obviously with the Key Lime or the Great Wolf incentive coming back online.
Okay, next we'll jump over to community development. First division will be the building and planning, building safety and planning. Current fiscal year, we're finishing the fiscal year just a hair below where we were estimated for budget. Next year, looking to stay flat, 0.3% increase overall. Some of the some of the things that we've accomplished this last year. We initiated the comprehensive land use plan. In 2 weeks, you'll be seeing an updated residential building permit fee schedule. It was last updated in 2004, so 14 years old. Some of the fees have been updated as inflation goes up, but several of them have not been touched in many years. So in doing that, we're looking to rebalance the permit fees as well as update some of those. So like I said, that will be coming forward to you in 2 weeks. And then probably the biggest time eater of our year, we oversaw nearly $78 million in new and updated construction in the village, which is a 14% increase over the previous year, which was a 10% increase over the previous year from that, and an 8% increase over the year prior to that. So last 4 years, we've seen significantly increased activity in the building and planning departments. Some of the tasks that we're looking forward to in this coming year is finishing the comprehensive land use plan update. It has kind of stalled a little bit, in all honesty, in the last few months. We've re-engaged with the consultant and are pushing forward. We hope to have some meetings in front of the Planning and Zoning Board here in the next month or two, and then getting that back on track and getting that finished later this summer. We are also investigating and working on doing a complete update to our building codes. We're trying to stay on a 6-year schedule for updating of the building codes to keep us in good graces with the insurance companies and the rating systems for that. So those will be coming later this spring, early summer in front of you. Like I'm doing with the residential codes, I'll also be tackling the commercial building code or building fees, permit fees. Those, once again, have not been touched since 2004. They're a little more complex, so I took the easy ones first with the residential ones, and we'll be following it up with the commercial and industrial permit fees. And then finally, one of our tasks that we're hoping to achieve is to update and simplify the code enforcement regulations. Many of our regulations are duplicate and triplicate in our municipal code, so I'm wanting to get those simplified, put in one place so that we're not contradicting ourselves as we go through and trying to maintain our community. Looking at our engineering side of things.
Cheryl, Dave.
Oh, sorry.
We keep mentioning Great Wolf. How's the progress out there?
We've been in close contact with them throughout the construction process. They are still looking at substantially complete mid-May with a soft opening beginning of June and official opening July. That's still their target. Anybody who's walked around out there or driven by, there's a lot of work yet to be done. All the tough infrastructure stuff that's behind the scenes is nearly complete. So it's all the finishes and things like that that are going to be, going together in this next month or two, and should come together rather quickly. So I'm sure you've seen the slides being erected on the outside. It's going gangbusters on the inside too. They've got probably 75 to 100 people working in there at any given time. The hotel wings are nearly complete. They've got all the, basically the rooms are all done for their update and refresh. They're just, we've got a meeting actually tomorrow with the crew out there to run through a couple of the hotel rooms, show them what we're going to be looking for as we do our final inspections, and then we'll be running through each of those rooms 413 times, to make sure all of them are safe for our visitors in town. But that will be happening in the next several weeks as we get into there, and then that will leave the just the common areas, the restaurant spaces, and the water park for what we need to inspect. So it's moving along. Like I said, they're still believe that they will be substantially complete mid to late May.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, Karen.
On the prior slide, kind of in the middle on the left for 2018, it said, actually it was the last bullet, oversaw nearly $78 million in private construction. There is no public construction, correct?
This is just building permit covered construction. So everything that is submitted as a building permit has a cost of construction associated with it. So though that construction by residential, by commercial, by industrial, totaled nearly $78 million of investment into our community last year.
And did you say, I missed, did you say that was, did you give a statement was it on par with other years?
Up 14% from the previous year, which was up 10% from the previous year. Yeah, so it's been, over the last 4 years since we implemented our permit software system, it's been a steady increase, and I think we're over 30% up from when we started on a year-by-year basis.
Thank God you got that software.
Yes, can track it. Still takes a lot of manpower. Okay, on to the engineering side. Everything's pretty much status quo on this side. A 3% increase proposed for next year, based upon some minor adjustments and salary increases and benefit increases. Moving on to our accomplishments from this last year. Completed preliminary design for the Knowles Road Water Tower and all of our Jawa connection points. We did 400 plus flood response inspections associated with our flooding last summer. We've provided follow-up with each of those and gave recommendations, and some of them were power related that we really couldn't do anything with, but some of them we were able to give some technical assistance and make some recommendations on. Completed the Magnolia and Belle Plaine roadway reconstruction projects, so we're glad to be out of those two areas. Completed several water main reinforcement projects, like the Des Plaines River crossing. We had a crossing at Fuller and Grand, a couple of places where we had made some interim closures. We were able to drop back last year and make those complete repairs. And then finally completed the Welton Plaza improvements on East Grand Avenue. Some of the things that we're looking forward to for next year, construction of the Knowles Road Water Tower and all the associated water system improvements. Scott has been speaking to you over the last several months about all that entails. We're going to be doing a water and sewer project for 2 blocks of Highland Avenue. Our 2018 resurfacing projects primarily focused on Almond Road on the west side of town and Belle Plaine, both north and south of Grand Avenue on the east side of town, and then doing drainage projects around Providence Village as well as some other associated areas around town. So any further questions?
So have you decided on your design for Almond and Data yet?
It is still under review.
Okay. And the Providence Village has really, that whole is like scope creep. It started with a few lots and then now it's like the whole subdivision.
Yeah, we finished our inspections on this last week actually in Providence Village, so we'll be talking very shortly about that, and we'll have to get the community involved. So we're getting really close.
Okay. All right, Jeannie?
And probably could have asked this during the regular meeting, but how have the communication on the Knowles Tower, have you had any feedback from people on that, or positive?
It's been very quiet. We have not received, to my knowledge, any phone calls or comments or questions coming in from the community on that. The site is posted. We've been taking the work effort this year in stages. We started with the brush clearing about a month ago. The tree clearing crew might be there. Actually, the rain, snow tonight might slow them down, but that'll be our next opportunity to kind of show the neighbors, hey, we're moving forward with things. But it's been very quiet. We haven't heard any feedback.
Because we've done a good job with communications, I think. There's no, like, the bulldozers. No, honestly, I think people know what's going on or anticipate it versus a bunch of bulldozers show up one day and nobody knew why. So I think the communication, being this far ahead with the FAQs, a special page on the website, it's been in the newsletters, we've done quite a bit. So no one should be surprised when the bulldozers show up.
Well, some people will be surprised.
I think we did a very good job.
Jack's done a great job pushing it out, and the feedback I have gotten really has been from nothing near the tower itself. It's been other neighbors in the neighborhoods going, hey, is this going to affect my water pressure? And we're able to quantify that and tell them that, yes, there's going to be a positive improvement, and this is what's going to happen. So I just haven't heard from any of the neighbors out by the tower itself. That makes me just a little uncomfortable. But, it'll happen soon. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Looking at the numbers for the police department, excuse me, we're looking for a 3.1% increase over last year, and the increase in expenses significantly comes from professional and technical services and contractual services. And we'll talk specifically about those and our achievements and initiatives for next year on the next slide. Our body-worn camera program was fully implemented in March. As an accomplishment from last year, our public education specialist, that position was created and staffed last year. She filled that position in June and is fully engaged in the school beginning with this school year. So we're making tremendous progress and having a lot of success from Officer Martin's movement into that position. One of the things that was approved in the budget last year was an increase in staffing to put additional officers into the visitor-oriented policing team, and we have been able to successfully increase staffing there. We now have 8 officers, so it's a 9-officer team that is being led by Sergeant Mark O'Brien. We also had an opportunity to reduce a full-time CSO position to a part-time position. Our full-time CSO moved into a position of higher responsibility into communications as a 911 operator. So instead of backfilling that position with a full-time person, we were able to put part-time hours in place. So we have hired 1 part-time CSO and are looking at hiring another. The e-citation project is one that has been on the budget for a couple of years now, and that is turned out to be a complicated endeavor with some technological challenges and some collaborative challenges. It is a countywide initiative, and no other municipalities have actually implemented the program. So we've decided that it's prudent not to be the first ones in, given the challenges. So we're actually going to push that beyond next year. So we're not budgeting to move forward on that. We do believe that that's a great program and will eventually save us money and resources, but some of the challenges there make it prudent to push that off for another year. Photo enforcement changes were mentioned, and that is one of the reasons why we have some increased expenses in the contractual line. We are in the middle of a 30-day warning period for the intersection of Washington and Hunt Club westbound. We're halfway through that, so that system will be going live this month, and there's additional increases, expansion of the program that's planned for next year. I'll save that surprise for last, although you can see that that's coming at the end of the 2018 initiatives. We did do some personnel restructuring that Brian alluded to in his personnel overview. With the retirement of the Deputy Chief of Support Services, we did some restructuring to create a Director of Support Services, which is similar, a lot of similar responsibilities. It is not a sworn position, and we have moved the communications structure, the supervisor and all of the folks in the 911 center, out from under the Support Services branch of the Police Department. So the supervisor of communications is a direct report to the police chief now. So that leaves police records, building facilities, fleet, administrative support, including policies and budget assistance, still a significant amount of responsibility that falls to the Director of Support Services. And we were also able, through this restructuring, to recover a police officer position. So with the reduction in the sworn strength, with the Deputy Chief retiring, we'll have another officer that we'll be able to put on the street. And that officer will also be headed toward the visitor-oriented policing team when that person is hired and put in place. One of the other expenses that's increased in this year's budget is the body-worn cameras holster, the firearm holster sensor. The feedback that we had from our officers as we implemented the body-worn cameras was very received well by them. But one of the concerns was opportunities for missing turning on the camera and the opportunity for human error and missed video. And so we wanted to look for as many opportunities as we could to automate that process. So this device is a sensor that goes on every pistol holster that a uniform officer wears. And so if a pistol is drawn for any reason, then that would automatically activate the body camera. So you can see that that's a key time when you would want to have video. So this will ensure that we don't miss video in those most critical of opportunities. The FOP contract and also the ICOPS contract, those are the collective bargaining agreements for our police officers and for our sergeants. Both of those expire at the end of April of 2019, which means we'll begin negotiating those contracts. So another increase in expense in next year's budget is to the cost of a labor attorney. So I don't expect any complications. I think that process will go like it has in previous years, which means we don't have an attorney sitting with us at the table. So that cost may be negligible or maybe zero, but it's prudent going into that process that we have some money set aside for that. So you'll see an increase in the budget for that. The photo enforcement program will expand to another one of the intersections. It was originally proposed back when the system was originally approved by the board, but this is Washington and 21, both eastbound and westbound. So we expect that the permitting and construction process will be underway, if not completed, by the beginning of the fiscal year. So by May 1st, it's possible that that intersection will actually be in place and have photo enforcement in both of those directions. And the question mark of the Gurnee Mill substation, Chris mentioned this under IS because it's the beginning of a long conversation about things that are shared responsibilities between multiple departments, and that is certainly one of them. It's got a big question mark next to it because it's sort of an open-ended opportunity for us at this point. We do have a fully functional substation where we can short-term house prisoners, do booking and processing, and have officers that are permanently stationed and working out of the substation at Gurnee Mills. This opportunity is to have a storefront, to move that from the back office out into the mall area where we'll have a public face and be able to do more things from a PR standpoint. So it's an exciting opportunity that we're working very hard on, but it's still sort of in the very early planning stages. So just to get that on your radar, that's why it's on the slide now. Questions about that before we move on to communications?
The substation will be a future topic up here. We've just got some things to work out with Gurnee Mills. So it's staff's got a plan for it, but it hasn't been before the board yet. So it'll get here. And the red light, Washington, Route 21, those were originally established and voted on by the board to be included, but we waited until after there was construction, and then they wanted to give it a 3-year period to see if there had been any improvement in the performance and all this other stuff before they would allow us to move forward with that. So we've been cleared to move forward with that one now. So did I address either of the two?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
When you talked about the body cameras with the holsters, what about the tasers?
That's already a function that we have.
So
The-
that's
the-
already there?
The body cameras will automatically activate a number of different ways. If an officer turns on their overhead lights on the squad car, so affecting a traffic stop, that would automatically turn on the body camera. If an officer draws their taser, then that will automatically activate the body camera. And now with this addition, drawing the pistol from the holster will do the same thing.
Thank you.
Greg?
And my question had to do with the substation. Is that a first for malls? Will we be one of the first in the country to have that, or is there another model somewhere else?
I'll look into that. If that's something we can take as a bragging point, I'll make sure that we can. I'm not sure. I don't know of any others, but I can't say with any confidence that it's the first.
Yeah, especially if we do it right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, Gurnee Mills is really interested in the partnership, the opportunity to work and use the visibility and the PR that goes along with that and stuff. It's just starting to take an inline retail space, has different cost dynamics, so I did my part, now Pat's got to do some negotiating, and then we'll bring it to the board.
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to get the cost flushed out at this point to just decide if it makes sense or not to do. So as we continue to work on that and numbers are solidified a little bit, we'll keep you guys in the loop, but we just don't have any solid figures yet to bring forward, so continue to work on it.
Choose my words carefully, the fake news that there's no police presence at Gurnee on the two social media sites that are not our friends. And there always is a police presence there. So, there's a lot of positives we can do with that substation being in line, but one of the big things is then nobody will say that anymore on social media that the Gurnee Police Department is not at Gurnee Mills, because they're there all the time. It's just they're in the back. The officers aren't in the back, but it's just
Office
so we
spaces.
yeah. We just that bothers us, and we've tried to communicate that, but it just keeps filtering up on social media. That so this is another way to tap that down and send a strong message. Karen.
First of all, I really hope we can make that work, the substation. I think that is essential, just to echo what the mayor said. I mean, while I'm not on the super negative sites, because I blocked, I still
fake
know
sites.
that everybody, you hear even on the positive sites, people bring that up about police presence, and whether it's a single incident that may never happen again at Six Flags or anything at Gurnee Mills, any positive, proactive, additional force is just essential for being our core funding sources. I wanted to ask a question. You don't have to answer it now, but I guess I'd like to see or be aware of, I don't want to be that micro in it, but be aware more of our Washington and 21 red light camera communication plan. Because it's one of those things that we're told we have to hear it 5 to 7 times. So to me, my question would it be beneficial to get all the noise and garbage out now? And is that why possibly we want to make sure we're over communicating? Or is it not as beneficial and not knowing the process and letting it go with the mud that'll happen when it does go live?
Well, I'm always a believer in over-communicating is better than under-communicating, and there are some requirements that we have to meet as far as press releases and putting out information. We've done that previous to the 30-day warning period that began at Washington and Hunt Club. So we'll be looking at putting out, making the community very aware of the activation of that intersection when that time comes, and then that 30-day warning period is part of that process as well. But using social media, press release, that kind of thing is educating the public, preparing them. We certainly don't want anybody to be surprised when the cameras are activated. So any ideas that you have in that area and being proactive in that, we definitely want to do that.
And I guess maybe a tag on is, I was thinking ahead in terms of the neighborhood watches to determine how many of those communities are coming in front of us soon, to have 2 opportunities. 1, Washington and Hunt Club, and 2 being our Knowles Road water tower.
To include it in the neighborhood watch meetings.
Yeah, as I sit here, I'm not sure if we've covered photo enforcement in neighborhood watch meetings before. I mean, we did a public information campaign, we've done group neighborhood meetings before, but I don't know that it has been a topic in
For
neighborhood
code
watch, and that
enforcement?
would be an appropriate one to do.
Code enforcement, I know it just came up last week, but it was a particular one that I shared with Pat afterwards, and, you know, he says that's kind of a,
It might not be a bad topic
Particular
for neighborhood
situation.
watch after we do the active shooter, because people don't realize it's like, I don't know, what did we calculate, less than 1% of 1/10 of 1/100th or so. I mean, it's such, out of the traffic count, it's so few. And to walk them through how it's actually a police officer that reviews these, it's not a camera and stuff, that would be. But I think Karen's just saying to mention it at this next series of Neighborhood Watch that we're bringing two more, you know, another intersection on, just as another heads up.
I'll make sure that happens. That's a good idea.
thank you.
Moving on to the communications budget. You can see the largest increase there is in salaries and wages, and that's as a result of the Consolidated Dispatch Center expanding personnel and the needed staffing to meet the needs of the Consolidated Center. Worth noting that we are increasing the part-time hours as part of that as well, so a heavier reliance on part-time that gives us the ability to mitigate the need for overtime for shift coverage, as we're able to use some part-time people to do that instead of full-time people coming in on overtime. Looking at the results from this year and initiatives for next year, thankfully Chris has talked a little bit about some of these things already, since there is quite a bit of crossover between communications and IS, and I'm not going to try and outdo him because his ability to speak to the technical aspects of this are exceptional. But the dispatch remodel was a significant project in advance of the consolidation, to reconfigure the way that the workstations are set up and to expand from 5 positions to 6. So that was a kind of a big deal. The UPS and the redundant power supply, Chris has already talked about, so I'm not going to try and outdo that. The consolidation itself is noted on there as a significant accomplishment. I think this year could be called the year of the consolidation. It was all-consuming for many of us. I think from the leadership of Pat, the village administrator, to all of the departments that were involved in this, finance, IS certainly, and then somewhere along the line, police and fire got involved in that, because I think we have something to do with that too, but it feels like we were just customers in that process a lot of the time. But that was a big deal. And May of 17 is when Beach Park Fire came online, and then the big one that doubled the size of our center was Zion Police and Fire coming in July, which was, as Jack pointed out, the July 12th date of the flood. July 11th was the date that the consolidation became live, so we were tested by as much chaos as we could possibly have had on that first day. So that was the collective bargaining agreement with our communications folks. We just completed that. That again was one that was conducted with 2 representatives from the employee group, and our team got together with assistance and strong support from Christine in HR, and we did that without having an attorney at the table with us, because we enjoy a good relationship with them and kind of built on the work of ICOPS with our sergeants. So it was a process that we were able to do without any real significant cost as far as the labor attorney is concerned. Going forward into next year, future partnership opportunities, the consolidation story rolls on. We don't have any particular partners in the pipeline now, but we are positioned to add additional strategic partnerships that make sense. So we'll be continuing to look for those, and as those opportunities come up, you will be among the first to know about them. But that's the Quad 1 radio configuration is a development in the radio system. Currently there are 2 radio frequencies. Gurnee and Zion are on one frequency, and Newport and Beach Park are on the other. Did I do that right? It's close enough. 2 are on one, 2 are on the other. The effort here will be to consolidate that into a single radio that all of the fire departments will be on. And then the microwave connectivity with Zion, Chris just talked about better than I ever could, so I will not. And then the ongoing training of personnel and communications, that is a result of bringing in all these new folks. So there are some basic things that need to be attended to, some basic telecommunicator training, emergency medical dispatch training, getting everybody on the same plane there. So a number of basic things that we'll need to accomplish this year and put a lot of effort into training, not just bringing them online and bringing the training up to par, but additional certifications and specifications that we'll need to accomplish there. So are there any questions about the communication side of things?
I have one. I know you said you don't have anything in mind right now for future partners, but is there an ideal size you're looking for? Is there something too big, too small?
You know, I think we would hear a proposal and have a discussion with anybody. You know, there are some that would pose greater challenges than others. You know, a smaller fire department would be easier to incorporate. A larger police department or a police and fire department like Zion would be a much bigger project. So there's probably things that we would favor over other bigger projects, but I don't think that we would not have a conversation and look at anybody that was interested in consolidating with us.
Okay, I mean, is there like something that you would think would be better fit for the county rather than us, or is it just too hard to tell at this point?
You know, it's interesting now that really geography is not a real limitation. You know, there are departments, communities that are in the middle of Lake County that are having their dispatch services provided by Glenview. So, you know, there really is so many different possibilities, but there is no specific community that we're talking with or even really close to talking with right now. So there's really no iron in the fire, but I can't speak for the whole group, certainly can't speak for the village, but I would want to keep an open mind and talk to anybody.
Okay, thank you.
And we're participating with the county in their larger, so the county has proposed consolidation 9112, which goes further than what the state's required. And we're submitting the...
The county, so the county's done phase 1 study. They're looking to continue on with a more fleshed out study. They've asked for a financial commitment from those that want to participate. The JETSB passed a resolution committing that funding to participate in it. They're having some intermediary meetings, bringing together public safety officials, some village managers to talk about if there's some things that they can come to an agreement on before the county moves forward, hiring a consultant to look at it further. So to try to shrink that scope a little bit if they bring a consultant on board. So we continue to participate in that. There's a meeting coming up, I think, next week where Chief Kavanaugh and I believe Chris are going to attend that with some other public safety officials. So that's kind of that intermediary meeting. The county, the deadline to pass a resolution to make a financial commitment was either March 12th or 13th. So they're going to wait until we get to that date, see who's come forward, and then reassess how they're going to move forward. So there'll be more coming from the county on that. I mean, like Kevin said, I mean, we're open for business. I think our biggest limitation is just space. We only have so much space to put so many people before we're adding onto the building or something along those lines, which is obviously very costly. So a partner that makes sense for us within our space confinements, you know, would be our biggest challenge and limit the size of who we could bring on. So.
Can I ask, is that, I saw it tonight, and I'm sorry, I skimmed it and didn't really, that there would be a $30,000
It's 30,000 they're
something
asking,
like
yeah.
that I saw?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Because Waukegan is doing that with...
Yeah, they
Waukegan's
were
the only one so far.
Yeah, they're before North Chicago tonight, I believe. The assistant county administrator told me to speak before their village board to let them know kind of what their plans are, and they've been before Waukegan. So, I mean, we'll see where they're at the 12th or 13th. Obviously, if they only have 2 or 3 people that are willing to participate, it's probably not going to go very far, or they're going to have to, you know, reimagine what they want to do. So at this point, it's just a commitment from us. Obviously, I mean, the JETSB won't spend any money until they've got a solid plan in place. So we haven't sent them JETSB hasn't sent them a check or anything.
Okay.
Just made passed a resolution that said if this moves forward, we would participate or be willing to participate.
I wondered if that
Yeah.
was going to affect us in the budget, and so.
Other questions on communications? All right.
Okay, so the fire administration budget, as you can see, is up 0.2 for next year. Brian went over the personnel changes, the reduction of the deputy chief, moving the part-time secretary and moving to a management analyst. There's quite a bit of savings there in salary on that. The biggest increase you'll see in the professional and technical services. Next year we have promotional testing. That's an every 2-year purpose, so this fund fluctuates every 2 years. So As far as accomplishments in the 17-18, we started the year off with placing a brand new ambulance in service. This was the ambulance that we went ahead and increased our fleet size to 5 vehicles in service. We run 4 kind of in our frontline status, 1 in the reserve status. We have this ambulance staffed 15 to 20% of the time due to staffing levels more than the ambulance itself. But this is all part of the long-term projections and as you're going to see next year as we're looking at the staffing and stations, this is part of the play for that. So the heavy rescue was kind of a surprise to us. FEMA contacted us and offered us a 90-10 grant to replace that vehicle. So federal government paid 90% on the heavy rescue for us. We came up with the other 10%. This was just under a $500,000 vehicle. So obviously we took that opportunity to say yes. We placed this in service. This vehicle was up for replacement anyway, so it really did well. Kind of a great surprise. We were able to actually make some changes to the old vehicle that we saw, and this has helped us out greatly on our special teams. Any sort of rescues we have to make at Six Flags, things along those lines, we're able to add some heavy rescue equipment here we weren't able to have in the past. The other thing, the fire department's seen a fair amount of retirements in the last year, so we did bring 4 new personnel on this January. Our overtime numbers have been up. We finally got ourselves up to full staffing here as far as all our positions are filled. Christine worked very hard on getting them all through their backgrounds and poly psychs and everything that's required under state law. We're excited about this. They brought new energy to the department here in January. It's a great accomplishment. They've all got through their initial training. They're actually out riding vehicles, and we're feeling their presence. We established also with Christine's assistance again a firefighter registry list, so we're able to start hiring our next employees. It's all in place. It'll be in place for 2 years. We're excited. We had a nice turnout of over 60 applicants. We have right around 30 on the list, so we'll see how that goes. For probably the largest, at least I think the largest accomplishment, and this has been in place from day one when I kind of took the position working with the mayor and Pat. One of the visions we had was to bring the fire department kind of the next generation, get ourselves technologically set. This first step here, working along with Jack and Christine, we managed this management analyst position came about. Other communities use them. This is a technical person, someone who is a graduate, just graduated with a graduate degree. They're able to come in, they have technology skills, and myself and this person will partner, and our plan is really to take all of our process in the fire department and make them much more efficient. Right now, I think I count an invoice within our building gets touched almost 6 times before it's actually paid. That's not right. We understand that. So we're working through that. We had initial interviews. We had a great applicant pool, 30 resumes. We got that down to 7 applicants, had initial interviews. Just last week, we interviewed 3 a second time. The decision any moment now. We're waiting for someone to make that call. It's tough. All 3 are very qualified candidates. And I went to Christine with an idea. She said, "You can't do that, John," so I've got to make the call on my own, I guess. So we're excited about getting that going. So I thank everyone for all your help with that process. As far as next year, we are set to go live with electronic patient care reporting. We actually have meetings up here early in April. We've been working with IS on this. We're actually going to bring in our billing companies as well while we're doing this. And we're going to go through our entire billing process. We're going to go to an RFQ. We're going to look. We've used the same billing company for 30 years at the same rates, everything in place. Going electronic, we should see some cost reduction in there. So finance and IS will be at the table right alongside us. We'll be working on, with the technology, the efficiencies. We should see reduced costs there. And we're told increased revenues. So we're hoping for that to play out. The other thing, I kind of touched on this, we have a plan next year to go through all of our administrative process, starting with payroll, working through invoicing, trying to get this all up to modern standards, getting it all computerized, get ourselves off so much paper. The amount of paper we're using in the fire departments, it's not how we should be. The last one, I find the exciting one. We're looking into Fire Station 3 and all of our staffing models. Working along with the battalion chiefs, we've put a study together. It's been presented to the mayor so far and the village administrator. We're also keeping the fire district board apprised of where we're at on this. You saw it in our 5-year plan that we believe there's some good locations for Fire Station 3. We think we can do it with a little additional staffing. We're getting the equipment up in place. We have to get the staffing in place and then the building. So that plan will be in front of you as we move forward in time. It's a good, exciting plan. So, any questions?
Great job.
Either way. So we have a division called Foreign Fire. This is money that comes in. It's designated specifically for what's called the Foreign Fire Board to use. They have a number of expenditures, but we just put the total receipts in contractual services, and they spend it how they see fit and vote on.
In Public Works, the biggest increase you'll see for next year is just wages and benefits. Other than that, everything else is pretty well flat across the board. Our initiatives or results from this year, we revamped our snow and ice control, and so far this year we had 17 events, 2,700 tons of salt, and 35,000 gallons of liquid, and that number will probably change tonight as I see it snowing outside. So 225 LED streets were upgraded, and that is in conjunction with engineering's projects. So we are right on track with them. So as they move through the village on their projects, we follow up behind them, change LED lights, change street signs as well. On our traffic control sign inspection, we replaced 200 traffic control signs this year, and we're now in the west side of the village. Everything west of Route 21 west of Hunt Club has to be completed. We have treated 1,008 ash trees, removed 107 of them, and replanted 120 for this year. So that's half of the trees. So we do that now every other year instead of every 3 years as we originally started back in 2011. And this year we have repaired 42 storm basins out of 150 that we inspected so far. For the initiatives next year, we will continue with our snow and ice control revamp as equipment, technology, materials come around. We'll continue LED street light upgrades, our traffic control sign inspections, EAV treatments, and storm sewer inspections. So it's kind of a program we continue on until we're all over and done. Any questions on the street side? On the vehicle maintenance side, it's pretty much a flat budget as well, little increase in salaries and benefits. This year, as we do every year, we continue to replace our vehicles, and this year we replaced 5 police squads, and we went to a smaller vehicle, to a Ford Explorer, only because we had 2 canine officers that requested not a Tahoe and not a car, but something in between. So we decided, along with the police chief and our vehicle maintenance supervisor, to test out the Ford SUVs, and they so far have been doing very well. We haven't had any questions with them. We replaced 2 large plow trucks, 2 small 1-ton trucks. We replaced a backhoe with a track excavator for water and sewer, and we replaced a small compact excavator, and 3 of the vehicles from PD were rolled down into community development, which we have been doing for the last 5 years. We continue to track all of our vehicles since 2009 in CFA, which analyzes all the data, all the equipment, all the repair costs, so we can make great decisions on vehicles. So our initiatives for next year will be identically the same. There's really not a lot more to go into vehicle maintenance than doing that. I believe Craig gave me a number this afternoon that we are probably 85% replaced all of the vehicles since 2009 to this date. That includes Public Works, PD, and Community Development. And I think, John, you're probably about the same with fire. You're probably longer than I am. So any questions on the vehicle maintenance side?
No, they seem to be running good.
Yeah, we're moving.
Looking at the municipal building maintenance here, this is the division that accounts for our building maintenance contracts, custodial services, landscaping for the municipal buildings. You see just a small reduction in supplies here. That was with the roof that is actually moved to the capital side this year. and then an increase in contract maintenance is what is the movement here. Getting into the individual funds now, so these are not the general fund. We'll spend a little more time on the water and sewer fund, but we'll probably move through these pretty quickly. So if you got a question, just let me know. 911 fund, again, we talked about this a little bit. We maintain this as a pass-through to the new jet ski. The fire chief and police chief talked about some of the Quad 1 radio and mobile data terminals that we'll be looking to purchase next year. That'll run through this fund. Motor fuel tax fund here. We talked about this a few times. Revenues $885,000, no expenditures this year. We'll reserve that for next year's capital program. The impact fee fund. This is projected fund balance to start the year about $1.56 million. Use about $400,000 of that. So as Pat mentioned earlier, we'll finish the year around $1.2 million in fund balance. Again, we use this to offset stormwater management capital and some sidewalk capital too. Police restricted revenue fund. These are funds that come into us from county, some state, that are restricted as to how they can be used. For the last several years, and probably several years before that, we've kind of let them accrue in here. At the beginning of the next fiscal year, we're looking at a fund balance of about $100,000. At some point in the future, should a capital need arise where we can use these funds, I think that this would be an appropriate place. They're a lot like MFT, restricted to be how they can use. So if something comes up, this would be a good place to look. The capital fund, this one accounts for non-water and sewer capital spending. Total here is $6 million budget. Fund balance is drawn down to $716,000. We talked a little bit about that earlier. It's something we'll need to take a look at and keep an eye on as we move through the year and next year, and how the surplus transfer, if there is any from the general fund, will shake out. Keep an eye on that. We have more slides on the capital plan here at the end of the presentation. So. Bond fund, this accounts for debt service on outstanding general obligation bonds. You see the Series 2011 is the only thing remaining in here. It's about $1.2 million in debt service. And just as a note, I put on here the Park District bonds again. They expire 12/15/2020, and they account for about $390,000, but those are paid out of the general fund. It just makes sense to note it here as we talk about outstanding debt. The SSA number 2 fund, this is where we account for the bonds for the Hickory Haven utility extensions. These expired 12/15/2020 as well. About $41,000 a year. Tax come in, pay the bonds. It's a pretty simple, almost pass-through fund. Golf course fund, no movement here. Again, no need for the reserve. I think they're coming in for a presentation.
Yeah, I've got Dirk set up for April 2nd, I believe, to come in to kind of give a look back at last season, now that the books are closed, and then talk about what he's got planned for this coming season. So Dirk will be in a month.
So more on that to come, but very, very healthy balances there when we met with them. Looking at the water and sewer fund, total revenues $9.15 million. This includes getting back to a historical water usage. We talked a little bit about how water usage this year was down. We're still seeing it carry through the year. It's lessened a little bit, but it was at one point up to 5% down from previous years. A small portion of that being the Great Wolf key lime impact, but also just general weather. Expenditures here, $9.55 million. Here's where we see the $400,000 use of fund balance. We got some details on the next slide here. Going into the year with a $5.2 million fund balance, coming out of the year with $4.8 million. This is better than what we had planned in our multi-year forecast and capital plan spend down. And it also includes the first $500,000 of the IEPA loan payment. So doing much better than we had anticipated, at least through the forecasting and capital program. On the capital side, big thing here at Knowles Road Tower, you see 5.71 or 5.73 million in expenditures. The Knowles Road Tower is $4 million of that. Other related capital here, 1.7 million, Hunt Club water main replacement loop, and then Public Works did budget for a pickup truck to be replaced in the water fund this year. And I will let Tom go over the results and initiatives.
Okay, for the water and sewer, for the results from last year, we completed the hydrant painting program. That was year 5, so that's completely done. We replaced 10 obsolete hydrants. This is year 2. We'll continue that program. We flushed and flow tested all of the hydrants in town, and we inspected 203 distribution mainline valves, which is an ongoing program as well. So going into next year, we'll still do a hydrant replacement year 3. We will start doing the hydrant auxiliary valves. Those are the valves that are in front of the hydrants. Those will all be exercise and maintenance performed on them if need be. We will continue to water distribution mainline valve inspection and repair. That's year 2. And then as Scott and Chris and Brian had mentioned, SCADA upgrades to our sanitary lift stations as well.
Can I just ask a quick
Jeannie.
question? But can the new water meters that you're getting, can they be taken off and used someplace else as they come, you know, like if a house gets torn down?
Yeah, yes.
So-
If they meet a certain criteria, yes. Age and what system we're taking off and what we're putting on, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to the last few funds here. Police pension fund. Total revenue here, $6.4 million. That includes employer contributions of $2.2. That's what the village puts in. Employee contributions of $988,000, and then investment income again here budgeted at the 7% actuarial assumption of $3.2 million. So in the end, a contribution to net assets, as it's called in accounting terms, in the pension fund of $3.8 million here. Fire side, total revenues $4.97 million. That includes employer contributions of $1.81, increase to $72,623. Employee contributions of $502,000. Investment income again budgeted at the 7% actuarial assumption of $2.7 million, and that comes out to a contribution to net assets of $3.3 million. So increase in the fund there. And then the last one, this is the component unit we spoke of earlier. So this is the draft budget from the JETSB, or from the joint ETSB, that is shown here. Again, component unit of the village, it'll be reported almost as like a separate entity in our CAFR. Will be audited with us. The official ruling, I guess, from the auditors is it's required to be a component unit because we hold the majority of the positions on the JETSB. So we have some sort of control over that. So then it falls onto our financial statements. So a couple things here. 50% of the PD generator UPS backup. Mobile data terminals, I mentioned before, replacement here, both on the Gurnee and design side. Looking at expanding to a fully functional, and Chris, stop me if I miss something here, a fully functioning supervisor position. And then we have, as we did this year, a reserve for future capital, which would be at some point software changing and some hardware changeouts when we get, if we get to that point. CAD systems, right. Moving into the capital program, not a whole lot of changes here. In fact, the only change was we removed $75,000 that we had kind of erroneously in the original capital plan when we presented it. That was for pavement striping that we had kind of left over in the MFT fund. So we zeroed that piece out. So that'll be the only change from the capital plan that we looked at in December to this budget. But total capital plan, $11.7 million. That's made up in 2 funds, the non-water and sewer capital improvement fund of $6 million, and then water and sewer capital fund of $5.7 million. And again, you can see the split. The water and sewer system this year has overtaken the transportation system as the biggest spender with the Knowles Road Tower. Transportation comes in at $3.2 million. Vehicles and equipment on $1.6 million. Building improvements, which we had talked about, includes a couple of roofs here at $797,000, and then stormwater management at $473,000. In the transportation system, some of the projects that actually Scott had mentioned a lot of these already: Almond, Belle Plaine, Long Meadow, Grand Avenue Concrete, East Grand enhancements, and then Providence Village under stormwater management. And then there's some budgeted funds for floodplain acquisition. And then obviously the Village Hall and Fire Station 1 roofs that need some work, replacement. water and sewer system, Knowles Road Tower, Hunt Club water main, Almond Booster, and then some sanitary sewer and lift station work. And then on the vehicle side, no changes here from the capital plan. 4 squads, a fire engine, 2 dump trucks, 1 pickup truck, and some IT equipment. I should say IT kind of general equipment. Big ones here, backup equipment and sand storage, which I believe is storage area network. All right, storage area network. So it's a networked storage space, essentially. Technical. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
I like the pictures. I don't know who picked them, but all the little pictures in the capital improvement, very descriptive, helps. The line item with the new financial software is really, really nice, too. Please share with your teams. You guys did a phenomenal job last year. The budget looks good. I know a lot of hard work went into it, but we got a lot done last year. It's just absolutely amazing. And the budget is almost not, it's almost flat for this year, and we're going to get even more done. So that really is a testament to how hard everybody on your staffs work. Questions? I think what really helps, these budget hearings used to kind of go on forever. At least that's the way they felt for me. But I think the quarterly financial updates that we get and we go through, so we're very well informed on revenues and expenditures before we get to the once a year. The multi-year forecasting, that exercise is very good and keeps us well prepared. And doing the capital improvement plan separately, it gets it. So we're really down to just what are the numbers, and I think that doing this in smaller chunks throughout the year make this so much easier. That's just my opinion, because I remember those Saturdays from like 8 to 2, and that was a lot. And I'm sure that wasn't any more pleasant for any of you. All right, I know we have some food for us, so...
Yeah, if there's questions between now and,
the one-on-ones help too.
Yeah, April 2nd, let us know. We'll continue to look at revenues and expenditures as we get some more time under our belt. We get that December sales tax number.
Yes, that's a biggie.
Get these numbers adjusted, so expenditures down, revenues up a little bit more, hopefully. And just to echo what the mayor said, it's, the department heads are making it easier and easier on me because they know I'm a tightwad, so they don't come in asking for, the moon and the stars.
Even I'm afraid to ask for anything.
So it's a friendly negotiating process that everyone is on the same page. They come with what's needed to continue to provide the service level and services that the communities come to expect. So they don't ask for anything more than that unless it absolutely makes sense. So, and that's what's in this budget. So hats off to them for working with me on it. So.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn our public hearing? Motion by Trustee Garner, second by Trustee Ross. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned. We'll be back at it at 7 p.m.